The RGB10X is a traditional horizontal form factor retro handheld from Powkiddy that can handle up to PS1 and PSP emulation. A seemingly basic option in a sea of retro handhelds. But is there more to the RGB10X, and can it surprise us from beyond its seemingly bog standard features? I've been using the RGB10X exclusively as my #1 console for the past week to answer these questions, and this is what happened. The first thing I noticed when opening the RGB10X is that although it looks like a load of other retro handhelds from Powkiddy, Ambanic and the like, it actually feels great to pick up. A simple design made out of good quality plastic with a matte feeling that helps with sweaty palm grip. Everything about the RGB10X feels familiar, and that's a really nice thing. Having just swapped over from playing the RGB20 Pro, the RGB10X feels like a natural transition. In terms of the games available, as both consoles came with the exact same game list, but also in terms of improvements. The RGB20 Pro used a plastic on the front that I didn't really like the feel of. However, the RGB10X uses that matte finish plastic that I'm much more comfortable with. The RGB10X just feels so natural to play that looking back, the RGB20 Pro feels a little bit gimmicky in comparison. With the same game list present, I expected to have a similar gaming experience. Starting off with PS1 again, I decided this time to jump into playing some Worms Armageddon. Worms has always been one of my favourite game franchises ever since I first played Worms 2 on the PC. At the time, I loved Worms so much, I wanted to have a handheld version of it to enjoy wherever I went, so I picked up Worms on the Game Boy. A fun game, but it didn't quite give me the Worms 2 vibe I was looking for. 25 years later, it's amazing to be able to sit on my couch and fire up one of the sequels to Worms 2 in the palm of my hands and have every bit of that Worms experience on the go I was craving back then. 16-year-old Stav would be amazed to see this right now. I had so much fun playing Worms Armageddon on the RGB10X that, spoiler alert, I played mostly this over the entire week, and the RGB10X let me fully enjoy every single second of it. Worms Armageddon really plays brilliantly on the RGB10X, as do pretty much all PS1 games. You could think that having only one analog stick could be a bit of an issue for some PS1 games, but for pretty much every PS1 game bar a couple, you're not going to need a second stick. And I think Powkiddy have realised that and therefore kept their focus tight with the RGB10X. I'm starting to appreciate that level of focus more and more in retro handhelds. I find it frustrating when a device tries to push in emulators for systems that the device clearly isn't catered towards. It takes away from the overall experience by teasing you with gaming experiences you can't fully enjoy. But I'm pleased to say that the RGB10X doesn't do that. It provides exactly what you need to enjoy gaming generations up to and including the PS1, N64 and PSP. Although the Dreamcast feels like it's missing from this list of emulators. Usually when a handheld can handle PSP emulation, it can also handle Dreamcast. But I guess Powkiddy decided that wasn't the case for the RGB10X. I didn't really get up to a whole lot this week as I was mostly fighting off the flu, and the RGB10X was a great way to relax and pass the time while recovering. Using the RGB10X throughout the week and getting sucked into Worms Armageddon, I noticed that the battery is really good. I think this is largely down to the fact that the sleep functionality is well implemented this time round, unlike on the RGB20 Pro. Now I don't want to make this episode too much of a comparison between the RGB20 Pro and the RGB10X. These week-long challenges are meant to be standalone perspectives of each individual console and the experience of actually using one as your main handheld over a week. However, considering that these two Powkiddy handhelds have landed in my hands back to back and their similar emulation target makes it hard to not compare them somewhat. Talking about how good the battery is, I did have one weird issue though. Towards the middle of the week, it seemed like my RGB10X had run out of battery. I went to plug it in and it showed 61%. So we unplugged it and then it powered off again. It had in fact run out of battery, but the software seemed to not be in sync to show that. This only happened once and didn't occur again throughout the week. Moving on from PS1 gaming, I wanted to see how well the RGB20 Pro handles PSP gaming. Starting off with Spider-Man 2, the RGB10X did a solid job of providing a smooth experience with only a few minor moments of slowdown. GTA Chinatown Wars was a similar experience. Now Chinatown Wars was a game that originally had a kind of choppy character animation to it naturally, so it can look a bit odd at times even on the PSP itself. But the RGB10X did a solid job of providing a smooth gameplay experience, although there were definitely a few noticeable stutters while driving around. With a great battery in sleep mode, along with a traditional but sleek rectangle form factor and minimalist focus hints like including just one analog stick, the RGB10X adds up to a hugely pocketable and portable retro handheld, something further bolstered by the great sense of durability and tight build quality. The RGB10X takes me back to some of the original Anbernic devices we don't really see anymore. A no-frills, highly pocketable device with an easy user interface and great selection of emulation capabilities at a price point that is hugely appealing. I've been a long-time critic of Powkiddy and their attention to detail, but if Powkiddy decided to continue to fill this spot in the market that Anbernic seemed to be moving away from, as well as treating us to some unique devices like the RGB20 Pro, I think they could do really well. If you want to find out more about the RGB10X's more unique alternative, the RGB20 Pro, then check out this video right here.